Generally, when a new patch is announced, I try to keep my expectations low. Reason being, the higher your expectations climb, the further they can fall. This is not a good way to live your life, but time and time again, Splatoon 3's patches have shown me that this is the best way to avoid the inevitable disappointment. This patch though, I wouldn't call it a good patch, but I wouldn't call it a bad patch either. Instead, I'd probably call it an interesting patch. This won't be a full patch rundown. If you want one of those, go check out Pocharo or something. There will probably be one of those out by the time this is uploaded. This is going to be me rambling about this patch, what I like, what I don't, how I think it will or won't change the meta going forward, but that's it for intro. I just want to jump right into this. The changes I want to focus on here first are the changes to the two cooler weapons, because Pencil is getting hit with 2 nerfs, and Zap is getting hit with 2 buffs. This is a change I really like in principle, because Pencil's been top of the meta for about a year and a half now, which is just too long. Pencil deserves to implode. This isn't Pencil imploding, but these are steps in the right direction. Some meaningful nerfs, I think. Reduced paint per shot plus 10 points for special on Blue Pencil is really going to hurt its cooler output, but keep its other strengths intact. Because Cooler does have other strengths. You wouldn't know it by looking at most Pencil players, but it does. My hope for this change is that by trying to rein in Pencil, the decision of what backline you play is a more meaningful one. If you're a Charger player and you prefer to play one-shot Chargers over Pencil, first off, stop. No you don't. Second, when Pencil had such a long list of strengths, plus consolidated backline and cooler into itself, it didn't matter how strong you think your Firefin or Eliter was, when the opportunity cost of not playing Pen is just too high. Now that it's toned back, maybe you could pick Firefin and not feel all that bad. I mean, you should feel bad, you're playing a one-shot Charger, but you know. Another thing that makes me pretty hopeful about the potential increase in backline diversity is the buffs to Zap. I don't like the buffs to NZap because I don't think it needed them, but anyways. If you want to run a non-blue pen backline, you still need a cooler, because that thing didn't get nerfed and is still the strongest special in the game. Of the non-pencil cooler weapons, only really 2 of them are sensible choices, and of those sensible choices, only 1 of them works well with other backlines, and that's Zap. If you wanted to play something like Ballpoint, you were almost forced to run Zap with it. This hasn't changed, but thanks to its buff, you don't have to feel so bad about it. On top of that, with Pencil potentially seeing less play now, a lot of the Splatlings don't have to worry about their really bad Pencil matchup. But another good point for backline diversity is just that Heavy Edit is still OP. Heavy Edit was in contention for being the best cooler weapon in the game before this, but now this cements it. But Heavy Edit is interesting. It doesn't work well with your traditional backlines. You probably won't see it around with something like Elite or Ballpoint. But one place where Heavy Edit does shine is with less conventional weapons. Things like Rapid Blaster Pro, Explosher, Jet Squelcher and Dowser Dualies. Weapons that you're probably not used to seeing, except maybe Rapid Pro. So these changes, while small, I do think will lead to some nice weapon diversity. There is another holy trinity of weapons that this patch also attempted to rebalance. As it stands right now, there are 3 relevant Big Bubbler weapons: Sparta Jr., Zinc Mini Splatling, and the Mint Denominator. And by far, the Mint Decaffeinator is the best of these. It is the easiest weapon to play, it is the easiest to slot into comps, it synergizes with so many good weapons in the game, it is the most privileged weapon to probably ever exist. If you wanted a Big Bubbler weapon, you were probably choosing the Mint Defibrillator. Its dash attack nerf is cool, I guess, make its weaknesses a bit weaker, never going to be a bad thing on a weapon this good. The paint nerf though is insane, in a good way. Having a weapon that focuses on damage, mobility, big one-shot kills, and also give it good paint is certainly a decision. This thing's bubble output could compete with other bubble weapons, even the ones that focused on paint and special output, so I think this nerf is pretty appropriate, especially since it will make room for other big bubbler weapons, most notably Zimmy. Because the mini splatling weapon is one that's kind of always been good. It has insane mobility, decent paint, decent range, decent kill time, it has a lot going for it. However, since the release of Splatoon 3, it's been suffering with a dire case of bad kit-sitis, where it either has a special or sub weapon that it just doesn't want. Vanilla has Hammer, which it doesn't want, but I'll get to that later, and Zimmy has Toxic Mist. A sub it can use, sure, but it would probably prefer something else. Even still, it sees some play. With the Decalculator being a fighting bubbler weapon and Junior being a bubble spammer, Zimmy tries to be a middle ground of some kind, but with the Decapitator's paint being toned back, it now overlaps less with Zimmy. Pair that with Zimmy's 3 frames shorter charge time and it might actually have a strong niche carved out for itself. Junior is the third piece of the Holy Trinity and also did get a change. but it's a minor one, so I don't really see much changing with its placement overall. It got a 3% increase to its bullet velocity, which is pretty cool. I don't see this changing Junior's standing though, because, well, Junior tries to put itself on the extreme of high paint and special output, which it does really well. It doesn't see much play though, because how often will a team want that? We're in a very fighting heavy meta right now, and this patch isn't going to change that. Junior doubling down on paint means you somehow need all your fighting needs covered by your other weapons, which can be a bit awkward. If you're running a dive comp like, I don't know, Tetra, Brush and Stamper, then they'd really appreciate the bubbler and the paint and will handle all the fighting for you, but that's kind of it nowadays. There was a time in the past where bubble would be used back in pen plus squeezer meta to help squeezer with its paint, but also give you better matchups into similar comps. I don't know if you're going to see that nowadays after squeezer nerfs, but I don't know, maybe it makes a resurgence. All this to say, sure, 3% bullet velocity does make it better at fighting, as well as increases paint range, but let's be honest, how often are you going to be picking Junior? Also, Recycle Umbrella is a bubble weapon that got buffs, but all this patch really did was remind me that Recycle Umbrella even existed, so I don't know what to think about that. And that's it for the positives. The rest I have varied amounts of dislike for. Splatshot Nova being an obvious one because, oh my god, Nova got a 33% decrease in scatter while jumping. 33% is a massive number. Like, oh my god, it's equivalent to 1 main of Intensify Action on Range Blaster. The issue though is that your aerial accuracy is based on your grounded accuracy, and Splatshot Nova's grounded accuracy is what is this buff supposed to achieve? What weakness of Nova is this fixing, or what strength is it strengthening? I swear to god, every time they release a new balance patch, they sneak in like one joke buff that does basically nothing, and this has to be one of them. Same goes for Splat Dollies. I don't believe it was necessary for Splat Dollies to get the old hit detection back from Splatoon 2's patch 4.4. Why even bother adding this? Dollies are in a really strong spot right now and will probably benefit from the changes happening to other weapons, so what made this necessary? Maybe for the sake of consistency? Maybe for the sake of having a coherent design vision, whatever that's supposed to be? Maybe one of the devs just played Splatoon 2 back in the day and is still salty about that nerf. It could be anything, but in terms of balance, this achieves nothing. Even with the heavy splatling, the 11% longer firing duration and 3 frames less charge time is really good. This makes heavy splatling an objectively better weapon. Unfortunately, this won't help it with its long-term success at all. It might see some short-term usage as people get excited to play any backline that isn't pencil, but then eventually all the splatling players will migrate to heavy edit instead. Yes, this buff makes it even stronger, but its main was not why it never sees play. It doesn't see play for 3 main reasons. One is its matchup to pencil, which is abysmal, but this patch may make that less of a problem. 2 is its kits, which are incredibly weak, which this patch doesn't fix, and 3 is that it's competing with heavy edit. You have a longer range weapon with a faster charge time, but the trade-off is that you have really bad kits, and you probably need to run a zap with it. Heavy Edit has 2 really strong kits, and its vanilla kit has cooler, which means your team options are a lot more flexible thanks to your role consolidation. There are some genuinely good and useful buffs here, but for every good Big Swig, Paintbrush and Mini buff, there is an iffy buff to Aerospray, Splashdown or Nova. Buffs that take weapons that are performing pretty poorly, give them a spark of hope, and then immediately dashes it against the wall. But there is one buff that I think needs some special attention. I of course mean the hammer buff. Because if my complaint about the buffs so far is that they do too little, this one swings in the complete opposite direction. I have a lot of issues with Hammer in its current iteration. In fact, I made an entire video about it. As you can imagine, when I heard that Hammer was getting a buff, I was getting quite excited. I'm an English Nouveau main, right? And this thing has been a victim of the nothing buffs for quite a while. And so hearing that this is going to be a meaningful change, insane. But this buff is not what we were asking for. Essentially, it's being changed such that its explosion after being thrown has an increased damage. Its 30 damage AoE is becoming a 60 damage AoE, making it easier to finish off weakened opponents. Cool. And its 60 damage AoE is becoming a 220 damage AoE, a one-shot that can kill through squid rolls and spawn armor. This buff is insane. Hammer's 60% damage radius is so large it would make Trizuka jealous, and I hate it. Pretty much since the release of Splatoon 3, Hammer has been really struggling. It has been consistently bottom 3 specials in the game. It's a really aggressive special that really wants you to get up close to the enemy team, but in practice, you never want to do this, since the counterplay for this special is too easy to make Hammer a reliable special. When I was making my Hammer video, I was genuinely struggling to find clips of me using Hammer, since instead of using it for its intended use, I'd pop it only to throw it immediately, because I don't want to be in the special any longer than I have to. Nintendo obviously saw this and was like, wow, people really like throwing their hammers away immediately. Hey, why don't we reward that with a buff to Hammer's throw? No, that's not why we do this. This doesn't solve any of Hammer's issues. All this really does is overtune a very specific part of it, which I just don't think is good design. This is the same kind of thing they did with Reslider, which could be its entire video, where instead of fixing its main issues, they overtuned its damage and paint. So now, not only does Reslider feel bad to play, it feels bad to play against. And I think Hammer will be the same. You'll want to continue not using your rush mode, but now you'll be able to do some very stupid things when it's thrown. In terms of standing in the meta, I think a lot of the doomed Hammer kits will probably continue to be doomed. I think Vanilla Inkbrush players might be more inclined to play what was always the better kit, but other than that, the main beneficiaries of Hammer are weapons that already saw play. We have, of course, Inkbrush Nouveau and Wiper, but also maybe Lunar Blaster, and that's kind of it. Everything else I just don't think will be worth it. I'm hearing murmurs of Mini and L3 seeing play because good main weapon with a good sub, but I'm not a believer. I don't think it's worth adding a vanilla Mini to your comp because you'll intermittently have a mono Zuka. I think this change is just one of those things where the rich will get richer and the poor will stay poor. Even still, I am so happy that Inkbrush Nouveau finally has a buff.